Audiobook narrator Mike Scott. When selecting your next audiobook, choose from some of the great titles narrated by audiobook narrator Mike Scott, like Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864. And if you're an author or publisher interested in having your written works produced as audiobooks, give Mike a shout at MikeScottVoice.com. Mike Scott, the voice of history.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Another holiday episode with our resident holiday historian, Matt Borders. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Just enjoying this muggy
sure.
May day. We just had a big thunder hurricane pour down on us, and so the air's a little cooler. There's a nice breeze, but man, it's hot. My pits are kind of ripe. Sorry. Anyway, so it's the 4th of July, as you may all know, and this is, let's see. We had this, and then we have our July 4th and July 5th anniversary shows coming out on this day. So a lot of stuff for you guys to listen to, but it wouldn't be Addressing Gettysburg if we didn't have something to acknowledge the holiday that we are celebrating today. And what was it like in the Civil War when they celebrated this holiday? And of course, we asked Matt to come back and do that. So Matt, 4th of July, we think barbecue, we think fireworks, we think people getting drunk, people blowing off fingers with fireworks, going to the beach, sitting in traffic on a Thursday, for like hours and hours just to go it's just awful. There's nothing about it that really I think is great, except for maybe the fireworks.
You would not have enjoyed a period 4th of July then.
Really?
Because other than the traffic, it's very similar.
Very similar. Barbecuing or some kind of
feasting in some way, a lot of firework variations.
It's not that I don't like feasts, it's just I don't like barbecues because nobody knows how to do it right. Like, it's just, you just get burnt stuff. Am I right, Eric? We've had this discussion before about the barbecues, right?
I don't like grills.
He doesn't like grills.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm with him on that. Like, it's just too gross. The charcoal is just nasty.
See, I love barbecuing, and my folks, particularly my father, was always really good at grilling.
Aha, well, that's different.
Yeah.
If you're good at grilling, then it's enjoyable. But most people, my family, nobody knew how to use a grill.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, my God. It was just, everything was petrified meat with just this black, coating on the outside, and it tasted like shit. Didn't like it at all. Didn't like it at all. But
sorry to hear that.
But we did have pool parties, and we did do the fireworks thing. That's another thing. If you don't go to the beach for the weekend and sit in traffic, you sit in traffic trying to get to and leave the fireworks.
That's true.
That's another thing I don't like. But what I love living here in Gettysburg is I can watch the fireworks from several places and avoid the traffic. So that's great.
Right.
All right. But it's enough about
the show up here must be pretty intense.
Last year I watched it from the angle. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're going to be able to do that this year because they changed the rules. But it was great. Like, it was maybe a dozen people were out there. Most people go like up on Seminary Ridge, or they go up to Oak Hill, and then they have a hell of a time getting out traffic wise. So I was like, I'm not doing that again this year. So I went down to the angle, like nobody was there. So me and my friends were there, and you just watch it right over the town because I do it at the rec park, which is on the south end of town.
Right.
And you just watched it from there, but it was awesome to hear the echoes of the explosions rattling down the battlefield, and to be there at night with those explosions. And if you use your imagination, you can kind of say, well, this might be what it was like to hear the battle from July 1st's battlefield, maybe, or something like that. But anyway, yeah, it's great. I don't know where I'm going to go this year, though, because of the rule change at the park. But
we'll see what's being allowed and where and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still coming out of this thing. So.
Yeah. Well, it has nothing to do with COVID. They changed the hours here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
it's like a half hour after sunset, you have to be out. Whereas back then it was till 10 o'clock. Yeah, it's sad. But anyway, that's not why we're here. We're not here to talk about how I hate barbecues and traffic. We're here to talk about the 4th of July in the Civil War. Yep. First of all, 4th of July. Give me a brief, what is it and why?
Okay, now as your listeners, your very knowledgeable listeners, Matt, know, the 4th of July is the celebration of American Independence Day. One of the great things that Great Britain gives to the world is a whole bunch of Independence Days, and the United States is a recipient of one of those.
Yes.
Now, what's fascinating about the 4th of July is, of course, it is not when the Declaration of Independence was written. It's when it was first given out to the public as a whole. Okay, when it's first read to the public as a whole.
It was July 4th.
1776. So the Revolutionary War had been going on for a year at that point. Okay, and a lot of folks don't necessarily realize that. But initially, we had been fighting the war to retain our rights as Englishmen, as a colony of England. We felt that our rights were being tread upon by the government in England at the time, and we were only looking to come back really as Englishmen. There was, of course, a vocal minority that was proposing independence almost right away, but it's going to be almost a year of fighting before that really gets steam. And, of course, the Declaration of Independence is then written, and on the 4th of July, 1776, it is read to the public at large.
So it's not the signing of it that we're commemorating, it's the reading of it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So is that immediately? I mean, they've still got a war to win. So are they
a long one too?
And a long, right. So do they celebrate the 4th of July during the war, or do they wait until they know that they actually have their independence?
It's definitely celebrated in 1776 with cannon fire and bell ringing and a lot of the classic things that we see up even to this day. And they would continue to celebrate it in different facets at different locations through the war, because remember, Philadelphia is going to fall too there for a little while.
Yeah.
Can't really celebrate the 4th of July when you're an occupied city, at least during the Revolutionary War. And so it will vary a bit during the Revolutionary War, but like we said in the opener, a lot of the tenets that we have today for celebrating Independence Day begin at that time and would only be reinforced as we moved into the 19th century.
So the war ends. Do they then say, okay, every year we're going to celebrate this, or does it take a while to catch on as a thing to celebrate?
No, it's pretty immediate. I didn't do too much of a dive into the Revolutionary period on this one, but it is pretty immediate that they're starting to celebrate this thing as an annual event. A number of the newspapers, similar to some of the other holidays we looked at, give lengthy discussions or diatribes on the history of the holiday, okay, where it comes from and why, and a lot of them are also diving into their state or their community's contributions to the Revolutionary period. One of the Vermont papers, for example, did a big spiel on the Green Mountain Boys and how important they were to the Revolutionary War, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So it's acknowledged very quickly, very early on, that this is an important event, and it's the big national holiday, something that all Americans can really get behind. Now, how true that is somewhat debatable. Of course, African Americans are really in this gray area of most being enslaved or free people of color that are second-class citizens. How much does the 4th of July really mean to them is debatable. And of course, Frederick Douglass has his famous speech prior to the Civil War, where he says just that. What does it mean to the slave?
Right.
But that changes too, and his opinions on Independence Day change as the war progresses. He has an 1862 speech where he's actually really trying to push this idea of fighting for one's independence, and he's using it as a venue to push the idea of African Americans fighting.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, so then let's skip ahead now. We've established it's going to be a national holiday early on. So let's get to the war then. So the war comes along. First, July 4th of the war.
But real quick, I wanted to touch on 1860, though.
Okay.
The summer before the war, just to give you a little bit of an idea of how they're doing things. And this article comes from the Aurora of the Valley, which is a Vermont newspaper. And it says, the 4th in Montpelier, Vermont. Who does not like to celebrate Independence Day? This is the only general summer holiday, and we see that echoed a lot. However, busy farmers and others, excuse me, when the 4th of July returns, there is an I love the word usage in this.
Let me see.
Yep.
Let's see. Busy farmers. When the 4th of July, there is an interreguam. Interreguam?
Eric's going to take a shot at it.
Here. Interreguam. There you go. It's interreguam. It's not interreguam.
At least you were able to pronounce it. Interreguam in business. The hoe and scythe are laid aside. The humming loom ceases its labors. The young and old rejoice to see the day. It is a day of rest from accustomed toil. It is a day of pleasure and excitement. Above all, it is the anniversary of the day distinguished by the Declaration of Inalienable Rights, which heralded the birth of a mighty republic. Do all who so much enjoy Independence Day remember at how great a cost of labor, treason, and blood our liberties were purchased. Amid the festivities of the day, we should indeed be most ungrateful did we not feel thankful that those heroes of the Revolution were marshaled in freedom's cause by that providence which is mightier than kings.
So this is 1860?
1860, yep.
And what's going on in the country? What's the mood in the country? Is that just a reminder? Was that no different in 1840, that notion there? Or are they trying to reinforce something because things are falling apart?
That's a really good question, Matt. I actually feel that this is hearkening to the idea of the mystic chords of memory, that we've all got a shared background and heritage. I really think they're pulling on those strings.
Okay.
Because we are moving towards the secession crisis in a big way.
So that's for the sake of the readers in South Carolina reading it online. Right.
Not necessarily online, but yes.
Yeah. Hoping the word gets out somehow.
Right.
All right. So then now let's get then to the first 4th of July of the war, 1861. Yep. What's going on during the war, and is it celebrated? And if so, how do they celebrate?
It is celebrated in greater or lesser degrees, particularly in the northern states. And what's interesting is, from what I was able to determine from looking at copious amounts of journals and letter groups, and also looking at the newspapers, the further you get away from the front northward, the more festivities you have.
Okay.
So the closer you are to the border states, if you're in the border states and if you're along the fighting fronts, it tends to be much more low key or not at all.
Interesting. Is that because even, like, for example, maybe this part of Pennsylvania, though not a border state, it's still close enough to Maryland where you still might have some people who are not exactly for the Union, and so is it people are just like, well, let's best not, do anything so we don't get our house burned down?
I think that's particularly true in the border states and in the northern southern states, if you will. Here in Pennsylvania, particularly in 63, which of course we'll talk about in a big way, I think it has more to do with the fact that the Confederates are still here. Yeah. Confederate Army is still here on July 4th, 1863. It is the most glorious 4th, and again, we'll talk about this. But the presence of Confederate forces in Pennsylvania, in the northern states, is very much something that would put a dampener, if you will, on your festivities.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. Before we dive into, say, some of the individual quotes and things I thought I would follow along our usual structure and give you a brief rundown of what else is happening in the war.
Sure.
For the 4 years of the war. So this piggybacks nicely. July 4th, 1861, we actually have a special session of the 37th Congress where President Lincoln asked Congress to support his efforts thus far in the war and to ratify his war powers. So Lincoln's been experimenting with war powers, as you guys know, at the beginning of 1861, what he can do, what he can't do, suspending habeas corpus, things of that nature. And now he's asking for Congress to approve these actions. Interestingly enough, they will do so. He's also going to ask for $400 million to prosecute the war and 400,000 men to supplement those 90-day volunteers, those early war, that 75,000 he'd originally called for.
Okay.
So now he's looking to have almost 500,000 men in uniform to deal with this rebellion.
Right, okay. So he's taking it seriously now.
He's taking it seriously now, exactly. We're also going to have slight skirmishing at Harper's Ferry, what was still Virginia at the time. This would be one of many engagements at Harper's Ferry over the course of the 4 years. Of course, there's skirmishing in Missouri, Farmington, Missouri, and 6 blockade runners would be captured off Galveston, Texas. So the war is already beginning to ramp up in the summer of 61.
So there are a lot of people think that, nobody fired a shot after Fort Sumter except at Bull Run, but that's not true. There's smaller little skirmishes and spats going on all over the place.
Yes, and as the Navy's beginning to establish the blockade that was also written up on the 15th of April by Lincoln, they're going to be gobbling up blockade runners or ships that aren't going into hiding. Of course, the Navy's so tiny, they're only going to have limited success in the first couple of years. 62, we do have a recon from Harrison's Landing and skirmishing at Westover, Virginia. So again, by this point, we have had a major Union army, the Army of the Potomac, move on to the Virginia Peninsula. They have attempted to strike at Richmond and take the heart out of the Confederacy, but by the 4th of July, they have been driven back after the 7 days to their camp at Harrison's Landing.
Okay.
So we're going to have some skirmishing and things around there. We'll also have some fighting around Port Royal, South Carolina, Velasco, Texas, and of course, John Hunt Morgan will launch his first Kentucky raid on July 4th, 1862. The Confederate transport ship, the Teaser, and its observation balloon are also captured by the Union Navy on the James River at this time. Now, this is one of the Confederacy's few observation balloons. Supposedly, it's the one made of silk petticoats and things of that nature. It will actually be captured with that balloon on the 4th of July. And one of the other actions that occur in 62 that we'll touch on with some of our quotes is the United States Navy would bombard Vicksburg, Mississippi.
So they're starting with the Vicksburg already.
Already, yep. In fact, it's 2 different fleets, technically. The one moving down the Mississippi River from the north, and Farragut's fleet that has punched through the forts south of New Orleans and has moved northward.
Okay.
Now, of course, 1863, we know it as the most glorious 4th. Vicksburg, Mississippi surrenders after a 43-day siege, and 30,000 Confederates lay down their arms. This is a big win for Grant. Absolutely. Word of the success of the Tullahoma campaign starts to get out. Rosecrans had forced Braxton Bragg from most of Tennessee by this point through maneuver, strategy, and a series of sharp clashes, but no massive engagements like we see at Vicksburg or Gettysburg, and so it didn't get enough play really in the press.
Not as exciting.
Not as exciting, and Rosecrans is actually really bitter about that if you read some of his writings and things. But it's an incredibly important campaign and eventually would lead to the fall of Chattanooga.
Okay.
Now, of course, as we have already hinted at, Robert E. Lee is going to begin his retreat from Gettysburg on the 4th of July after the Confederate defeat here, and he has sustained horrific casualties and now has a wagon train that is, from what I've written, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Matt, is 17 miles long.
Yeah.
That is horrifying. But the vulnerability of this wagon train, both of wounded men and supplies and whatnot, is going to be very tempting, and we're going to have a series of cavalry engagements that actually begin on the 4th of July. Monterey Pass, which I've had the pleasure of visiting, and of course Fairfield Gap as well. Now, we'll have additional fighting across the board. Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, New Mexico, Missouri, and near Richmond, Virginia would all have clashes on the 4th of July, 1863. So a lot of fighting by this point. We're deep into the war.
Oh, yeah.
Now, finally, the last full year of the war, 1864, the Reconstruction debates of the 38th Congress are going on Independence Day, and President Abraham Lincoln will pocket veto the Wade-Davis bill, which basically was a radical Republican bill stating that states that want to come back into the Union from the Confederacy needed a majority of their voting populace to approve. They needed to be proven as loyal and willing to vote on coming back into the Union.
Okay.
Whereas Lincoln had already been experimenting with bringing states back in, but only having 10% of the population needed to approve their movement back into the Union.
Right, okay.
And so he's looking for an easier way for the states to come back, and so he's going to pocket veto this much harder bill. Harper's Ferry, taken again on the 4th of July, 1864. Jubal Early's Army of the Valley District has made it to the northern end of the Shenandoah Valley and takes the depots at Harper's Ferry prior to the Third Confederate Invasion of the North. That'd be the Monocacy campaign.
Okay, that's your neighborhood.
That's my bailiwick, exactly. And then, of course, we have the ongoing siege of Petersburg, continues in Virginia, while in Georgia, Sherman's forces reach the defenses of the Chattahoochee River, with multiple clashes erupting along that defensive line, with the Shoepades, one of the more unique defensive structures of the American Civil War that we only really see along the Chattahoochee.
What is a Shoepade?
A Shoepade is basically building a small fort into the embankments of the Chattahoochee, but instead of using earthworks, it is an earthwork with a shell of logs around it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which sounds like a great idea, but earthworks, of course, are strong because they can absorb shell fire and artillery fire, but having this frame of wood around them just makes them able to take some real damage, and Sherman's forces are going to hammer their way through these Shoepades.
Okay.
Named after the gentleman who designed them.
Gotcha.
Now, we would have additional fighting at Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi in 1864. And of course, as you guys know, by 1865, the war has essentially wrapped up. The Grand Review has already taken place in Washington, D.C. of the two main Union armies. Everything's basically over but the shouting. The Lincoln conspirators have been convicted, and they will hang 3 days after the 4th of July, the four who do get sentenced to death. And I believe the only Confederate forces still in the field at that point was the CSS Shenandoah. And that's just because she was up in the Bering Sea.
She didn't get the news.
She didn't get the news.
Yeah.
She won't get the news until August. So there's a lot going on the 4th of July during the American Civil War through all 4 years.
Okay, so how did they celebrate it? This is what always... First of all, I've always wondered this because, the southern states, they had a hand in the Revolution.
They certainly did.
And, it was their independence from England just as much as it was ours. So did they celebrate the 4th of July while the war was going on, or did they look at that as strictly an United States holiday?
From the documents that I looked at, it's primarily looked at as a United States holiday.
Yes, that's interesting.
It is interesting, and who's to say that there wouldn't have been some sort of adaptation of a new Independence Day or
like the 5th of July.
5th of July, or even a recommencement of the holiday had the southern states won their independence from the Union. But in 1861 to 1865, there's very little celebration of Independence Day for the national holiday as we know it in the southern states. I do have a few quotes here that reference it.
Okay.
A very interesting one from 62 that we'll touch on.
Sure.
But for the most part, we're not really seen celebrating in the traditional sense of the national summer holiday, as that one article called it.
No barbecues.
Right. Well, and especially as the war continues.
Yeah.
But you'd asked, how was it celebrated? So why don't we jump into it? This comes from some of those rapscallions in the 9th New York Infantry, the Hawkins Zouaves, down there along the Carolina coastline on the 4th of July, 1861. Charles F. Johnson wrote, "We celebrated here at Newport News with a grand parade of all the regiments, the playing of the national airs by the regimental band, and by a salute of 34 guns for the Union, by our battery of Columbiads," so big guns. In the afternoon, we were given general liberty, which I have employed in sketching the curious old windmill not far from here, just beyond the picket line. So that seems to be a fairly low key, but a traditional in many ways, between the music and the general liberty being given, so they could go and do what they want, essentially. And we're going to have some interesting examples as this continues throughout the war. And we're going to come back to the 9th New York because particularly, I believe it's in 62 or 63, they have quite a party, and it's commented on by other regiments as well.
Oh, I like these.
Similar to what we had.
with the St. Patrick's Day
exactly.
one. Yeah.
Now, this comes from All for the Union by then Corporal Elijah Hunt Rhodes of the 2nd Rhode Island Infantry, also 4th of July, 1861. Our first Independence Day in the Army, and we have had a grand celebration. Reverend Augustus Woodbury, chaplain of the 1st Rhode Island Detached Militia, read the Declaration of Independence. This is also very common at the time, as the reading of the Declaration.
Sure, that makes sense.
Right. To both the 1st and 2nd Rhode Island regiments at 9 a.m. Prayer was offered by Chaplain Jameson of the 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers, and a fine oration offered by Reverend Father Quinn, Assistant Chaplain of the 1st Rhode Island. I'd never heard of an Assistant Chaplain before.
Hey, administering to the spiritual health of a bunch of men is tough. You need an assistant once in a while.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Captain Cyrus G. Dyer, Company A, 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers, followed with an excellent poem. At 12 noon, a national salute was fired by the light battery, and we were invited to a fine dinner. So, again, eating, explosions, yeah, the volleys being fired, either by the men or by the artillery, is something that we're going to keep seeing as well.
Okay.
That was 1861, though, so we're not really into the meat of the war, right?
The luster hasn't worn off yet. They're still full of patriotic fervor.
Yes. And by 62, we're starting to see the strains of this thing. Okay. So this quote comes from George T. Stevens, the surgeon of the 77th New York Infantry, from his 3 years in the 6th Corps. A gloomy 4th of July, again, 1862, was this to us. Though every effort was made to keep up the spirits of the men, early in the morning the enemy opened a fire upon parts of our line, to which our guns responded. A national salute had been ordered, and precisely at the hour appointed, while the fighting was in process, the heavy guns were heard booming the salute. Our boys listened for a moment, and then, as if all inspired with new life, they made the welkin ring with their cheers. The bands, roused from their long inactivity, pealed forth stirring national airs, and the commander-in-chief, meaning McClellan, issued an address to his army, in which he praised its gallantry and firmness, declared that he himself had established the new line, that if the enemy would come upon us now, we would convert his repulse into a final defeat. Okay. Now, again, July 4th, 62, this is federal forces have fallen back to their massive camp on the James River, known as Harrison's Landing, during the Peninsula Campaign and the subsequent 7 days. So the Federal Army is in a good position to repulse anything that comes at them, but they're still dealing with Confederate forces trying to close up around Harrison's Landing, and that's what he's referring to. It's interesting that he mentions the long inactivity of the bands, because McClellan had actually ordered that the bands were not allowed to play during this period.
Why?
Because he was concerned about drawing Confederate attention and fire. If they're piping along or drumming along out there in the distance, it's going to draw attention to them and the potential movements of the army.
Okay.
So up until the 4th of July, the bands had been very quiet for a while.
But on the 4th, he allowed them?
Yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Now, touching on one of our few Confederate-leaning quotes, actually comes from a Confederate girl's diary, July 4th, 1862. This is from Sarah Morgan Dawson, and this is very interesting because she's talking about wanting the independence for the southern states and wanting to be able to break away for the Union. And then she goes on to say, "And yet I would rather we would achieve our independence alone if possible. It would be so much more glorious. And then I would hate to see England conquer the North, even for our sake. My love for the old Union is still too great to be willing to see it so humiliated.
Wow.
If England would just make Lincoln come to his senses and put an end to all this confiscation, which is sweeping over everything, make him agree to let us alone and behave himself, that will be quite enough. That will be quite enough. But what a task. If it were put to the vote tomorrow to return free and unmolested to the Union or stay out, I am sure Union would have the majority."
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Very interesting, yes.
Now, of course, the Confederacy...
See, it's just another example of how everything is just so complicated. Like, you can't just, the South was for this, the North was for that. Like, you know, you can be for both things at the same time, apparently.
Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways.
Independence, and you still love the Union.
Right. Because she was... specifically before this quote, talking about the potential for recognition from Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very big possibility.
Which year was that from?
62.
62.
It's a very big possibility in the summer of 62. In fact, the House of Lords would discuss the potential of recognition.
That's right.
But Prime Minister Palmerston would basically table that until they hear what happens after the first Confederate invasion of the North. Now, pressing on, again, an 1862 quote here, we've been dealing primarily with folks around the Peninsula Campaign so far. What about the Navy? Or the vessels attached to the Navy.
The ships at sea.
Yep. This is on board of the St. Cossack, which she's a transport ship. All the vessels comprising the fleet were very gaily decorated with flags. The mast presented a very fine appearance, as every vessel had all her colors flying in honor of our birthday, of our independence. And this comes from Captain James Wren of the 48th Pennsylvania Infantry. They're being transported at the time, but he's seen the whole fleet out there on the James River and beyond, discussing it. That's from the book New Bern to Fredericksburg. Now, I do have a rather long quote here, if you don't mind me.
Go ahead.
This is again from our guys in the 9th New York Infantry.
Okay.
From the Long Roll, July 4th, 1862, Charles F. Johnson wrote, "So far as I am concerned, I do not wish to have anything better to laugh at on the 4th of July to come. In the morning, anyone who would go after it could have 15 rounds of blank cartridges to use as he wished. After the parade and the reading of the Declaration of Independence, 2 o'clock was fixed for a grand, fantastic burlesque on the dress parade, in which anyone who wished to make himself ridiculous could participate. At 2 exactly, several drums and kettles sounded for the battalion to fall in. The colors took their position, and the guides were thrown out. The colors were 1 black flag, no quarter, and a white flag, all quarter, appropriately inscribed. There is no use trying to describe the rest. You have all been to a masquerade ball, I suppose, and from that you can fancy something very ridiculous. Only I am afraid you cannot arrive at anything ridiculous enough. The artillery was represented by common muskets tied on wheelbarrows, from which the formidable battery we had some very good volleys. Sergeant Major was colonel and had his saddle put on wrong side foremost, so he put it on backwards.
Backwards, yeah.
The child of the regiment was Corporal Farrell of Company B, and he made the best character of the show. Waring made a very good zouave with a Roanoke medal on his breast, a brass candlestick with the top knocked off. Corporal Downing of our company was a rag woman and played the part to perfection. The battalion, numbering some 200, marched down to the camp of the 89th and to headquarters and gave a magnificent dress parade at both places with salutes from the batteries. The band accompanied them, but the material strains were unfortunate in harmony, for each man played his own tune. Colonel Hawkins was not at his quarters, and everyone felt a little disappointed. I'm going to wind up the 4th by going to the theater tonight, this performance probably being our last, as our regiment is soon going away. So we have theatrics within the regiment. Of course, we've talked about this before as some of the ways to amuse themselves.
Sure.
The troops would have prayer circles, reading groups, acting troops, things of that nature. And it seems like they're just allowed to do as they will.
Yeah. Well, it is Independence Day.
Right, exactly.
Celebrating freedom and liberty. So they should be able to do what they want to do.
Right.
One day a year.
One day a year. Now, there it is. This is a observance from the 89th New York to this event.
Okay, yes,
Okay?
Right, you were mentioning this.
Sergeant George M. Inglis from the book This From George, his collection of letters, 89th New York Infantry. Yesterday was the 4th of July. We had a great time here. The colonel gave us 60 to 80 rounds of blank cartridges.
Whoa.
And we had a big old time firing them. It was one continual roar of musketry. Cannons were booming all day. We had a grand dinner of hard crackers and coffee. We did not have any firecrackers, but plenty of hard crackers. Little pun there. The 9th New York State Volunteers got up a company of ragamuffins and marched through our camp. They beat anything I ever saw up in Binghamton. So they're commenting on the wildness of the 9th New York. Again, Hawkins Zouaves there have a little bit of a reputation.
Yeah, yeah. Where were they out of in New York?
That's a fine question. Off the top of my head, I cannot tell you without guessing.
Hawkins Zouaves?
Yeah.
I believe they're in New York City.
I would imagine so if they're rowdy.
Right. Well, you got the boroughs. They're all independent cities at the time, too.
Yeah.
So, but let's see here. Well, I've got a couple more here for 62. This actually comes from Private John S. Jackman of the 9th Kentucky Infantry, Diary of a Confederate Soldier. So again, one of the few Confederate accounts I could find, and this actually touches on one of those events that we talked about for 62. Today, we all expected a severe bombardment, but there was not a shell thrown into the city. The fleet fired 33 guns as a salute. Where is he? He's at Vicksburg.
Oh, yes.
So the fleets are there. Instead of bombarding the defenses of Vicksburg, they're firing a salute from their guns.
They took the day off.
Apparently
Yeah.
so.
And the Confederates didn't use that to their advantage?
Doesn't say so. Yeah, he doesn't say that there was any advantage taken, but nor does he say that there is any frivolity or celebration going on in Vicksburg.
Yeah, I would imagine not.
Right. Now, going back to Elijah Hunt Rhodes, now a sergeant major in 1862, 2nd Rhode Island Infantry. This is a queer 4th of July, but we have not forgotten the national birthday. And a salute has been fired. We expect to have something to eat before long. Soldiering is not fun, but the duty keep us in duty keep us in the ranks. Well, the war must end sometime and the Union will be restored. So the realities of this thing is starting to set in, even on a guy like Rhodes.
Yeah.
And actually, Rhodes's diary, All for the Union, was one of the best sources I found because he actually has a reference to Independence Day on all five.
Oh, 5, that's right.
He's in it for 5 years because he actually does make a little comment about 65. But yeah, he's in it the whole time, has a comment on each one. I didn't include everyone in these comments because some of them are fairly generalized.
Did you include 63?
For Elijah Hunt Rhodes?
Yeah, Rhodes.
Let me see if I did here. I have a bunch in 63. 63.
Well, it's all right if you didn't. I mean, I was just wondering if you
I
did.
didn't. I did not.
I thought you were leading into that. That's why.
I'm leading into 63, but not for Elijah Hunt Rhodes.
Okay, gotcha.
1863. I'm going to see if you can guess who wrote this one.
All right, Eric, you got your guessing cap on too?
Sure.
As it was the 4th of July, there was an idea that Meade would be inspired to try and win a real victory. He found a good line and occupied it, but we found a good line and occupied it, but Meade did not come. And in the afternoon, the march was commenced along towards sundown. So not really celebrating.
I have no idea.
Read it again.
As it was the 4th of July, there was an idea that Meade would be inspired to try and win a real victory.
Keep going.
We found a good line and occupied it, but Meade did not come. And in the afternoon, the march was commenced along towards sundown.
Was it AP Hill?
Longstreet.
Good guesses both.
Damn it, Ewell.
Porter Alexander.
Damn it.
In fighting for the Confederacy.
Bastard.
I did find his wording to be very interesting, that to try and win a real victory.
Yes.
Kind of downplaying July 3rd there, particularly.
Downplaying the shellacking that
Exactly.
they got. Yeah.
And I thought it would be appropriate for a brief reading of the general orders from the Army of the Potomac on July 4th.
Sounds good.
Okay. Headquarters, Army of the Potomac, near Gettysburg, July 4. The commanding general, in behalf of the country, thanks the Army of the Potomac for the glorious result of recent operations. Our enemy, superior in numbers and flushed with the pride of successful invasion, attempted to overcome or destroy this army. Utterly baffled and defeated, he has now withdrawn from the contest. The privations and the fatigue the Army has endured and the heroic courage and gallantry it has displayed will be matters of history to be remembered. Our task is not yet accomplished, and the commanding general looks to the Army for greater efforts to drive from the soil every vestige of the presence of the invader. It is right and proper that we should, on suitable occasions, return our grateful thanks to the Almighty Disposer of events, that in the goodness of His providence He has thought fit to give victory to the cause of the just, by command of Major General Meade. So, kind of the classic, good job, boys.
Yeah.
And
Good
also
job,
hitting
boys.
on some of those classic ideas of we've been outnumbered during this fight, even though, of course, we know that was not the case.
We've been outnumbered, and he's tugging on the patriotic heartstrings, and
and talking about the
Nice little pat on the back while like a third of the army's out burying dead bodies.
right, and the privations of the armies and everything
4th of
else.
July, guys.
yeah. Happy 4th of July, while you're out there burying your buddies.
Here, put this putrid corpse in a little hole.
Hey, Henry, I got a leg. Go ahead.
Jeez.
Got a wing.
What, do you like to die?
Now,
Good fellas.
we have commented several times about the 4th of July, 1863, being the most glorious 4th, and it is referred to that as because of the Union victory at Gettysburg, Vicksburg, and the Tullahoma campaign. And these massive Union victories that are now going to, in many ways, start to, for some, they see it as a turning point or the turning of the tide in the war. Now, this actually comes from Major General Jacob Cox, who's commanding out west. He's in the Department of the Ohio. And he would write in his Military Remembrances of the Civil War, Volume 1, these victories, coming together as they did on the 4th of July, made the national anniversary seem more than ever a day of rejoicing and of hope to the whole people. We did not get the news of Grant's victory quite so soon as that of Meade's, but it came to us at Cincinnati in a way to excite peculiar enthusiasm. And then he's going to state, an excellent operatic company was giving a series of performances in the city, and all Cincinnati was at Pike's Opera House on the evening of the 7th of July. General Burnside and his wife had one of the boxes, and my wife and I were their guests. The second act had just closed. A messenger entered the box where the general was surrounded by a brilliant company. and gave him a dispatch which announced the surrender of Vicksburg and Pemberton's army. Burnside, overjoyed, announced the great news to us who were near him, and then stepped to the front of the box to make the whole audience sharers in the pleasure. As soon as he was seen with the paper in hand, the house was hushed, and his voice rang through it as he proclaimed the great victory and declared it a long stride toward the restoration of the Union. The people went almost wild with excitement, and the men shouted hurrahs, the ladies waved their handkerchiefs and clapped their hands, all rising to their feet. So that's one heck of a way to get the news.
Yeah, really.
Now, piggybacking on this idea of the fall of Vicksburg, this actually comes from Private John Haley of the 17th Maine from the book The Rebel Yell and Yankee Hurrah. This is actually written on July 5th of 63. At night, we received news of the fall of Vicksburg. This sent a thrill down our spines and helped raise our spirits, for we had suffered such appalling losses of generals in this encounter, Gettysburg, that we feel quite blue. Generals Reynolds, Hancock, Sickles, Webb, Weed, Vincent, Hazlitt, and Graham, besides many lesser officers, had been killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. But the fall of Vicksburg and the defeat of Lee here at Gettysburg must make the Confederacy tremble to its foundations. So the men in the ranks, this is not just highfalutin officers, this is not just the newspapermen, this is the men in the ranks realizing something very important has occurred.
Yeah, right. It's a turning of the tides, if you will.
In many ways, exactly.
Yes.
I can keep going.
Keep going.
Excellent. We're going to jump into the last full year of the war now. Okay. 1864 is a terribly bloody year, as we're all aware. And it's going to, we're really going to start to see the strains of this thing in some of these comments.
The guys are kind of getting fed up.
Right.
And they're like, F it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I don't blame them.
This is actually coming from a gentleman who gets to muster out on the 4th of July of 1864. This is First Lieutenant John Paver of the 5th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. From what I saw from 1861 to 64, I was mustered out in Cincinnati, July 4, 1864. And after having worn the blue uniform for over 3 years, I felt a little queer to be once more clad in civilian clothes. I did not attempt to keep a tally on the total number of miles that I passed over from my enlistment until my muster out, nor search any records to obtain this, as it does not figure as essential. And this is kind of a little bit of pushback against the guys who are recording every little thing they did in the Army and all of these regimental histories that are going to start coming out after the war that are listing every little thing they did and things like that. Right. But he felt it important enough to mention that he's finally out, and he's out on the 4th of July. Speaking of the 4th of July, at this time, Colonel Fellows was in prison at Johnson's Island with about 3,000 other officers. The rebels gained permission for Colonel Fellows to speak on the stand used by the guards as a watchtower. As he poured forth his thoughts, turning the 4th of July to the glory of the South, even the Yankee guards who had stopped to listen were spellbound by his eloquence. He had it all his own way, and the rebels were shouting like mad. The officer of the day finally awoke to the situation, took a file of soldiers, and brought the speech to a close. And that interesting comment comes from William E. Bevins of the 1st Arkansas Infantry, reminiscence of a private, July 4th, 1864.
So wait, so that was Confederate prisoners?
Yep.
And the colonel was given permission to give a speech?
Yep, on the 4th of July.
On the 4th of July, about...
What exactly about?
Yeah.
We're not certain, but he says he turns the 4th towards the glory of the South.
Yes,
so I'm assuming he's going to touch on something you mentioned at the beginning of this, how important the Southern campaigns were to the establishment of the country.
Right.
Some historians, some Revolutionary War and Revolutionary period historians claim, and I think there's a certain amount of gravitas to claiming it, that the Southern campaigns were just as, if not more important than the fighting going on in Pennsylvania, New York, and elsewhere.
Where did Cornwallis surrender?
Right, in Yorktown.
Yeah, it wasn't Boston.
That's right. But Bevins here, I think is really speaking to that by talking about the Colonel Fellows here and how he's turning the holiday on its head. Again, one of the few Confederate quotes I was able to find. This next gentleman, we've actually spoken about him before. This is Leander Stillwell of the 61st Illinois Infantry, the story of the common soldier of Army life in the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. At about 9 o'clock in the morning of July 4th, we fell in on the regimental parade ground, broke into column of companies, right in front in open order, and greatly feared Inspector General, the Inspector General entering on his duty. As already stated, we looked hard. Many of us were barefoot, and our clothes in general were dirty and ragged. But Colonel Marcy knew we had come off a march. He was a very sensible man and capable of making some allowances. In accordance with the regulations, he passed in front of us, walked slowly, and looked at us critically. As he came opposite each soldier, the latter brought his piece into the prescribed position for examination. But Colonel Marcy contented himself with a sweeping glance and did not take the musket in his hands. When he passed to the rear ranks and walked slowly along behind us, while we stood immovable with the eyes fixed to front, it was soon all over. He then approached Colonel Orr, said something I did not hear, but which was evidently pleasant, for the colonel smiled, then turned, facing us, and with a sweep of his arm in the direction said loud enough for many of us to hear, "Good soldiers," whereupon we felt much relieved and proud, and the dreaded inspection was a thing of the past. This is interesting because, first off, this is showing that the war grinds on.
Yeah.
This is a general inspection, the sort of thing these guys would have been dealing with, if not every day, then in a fairly regular basis.
Right.
You guys, of course, are familiar with Colonel Marcy. He is the father-in-law to George Brinton McClellan. He had been McClellan's chief of staff earlier in the war. He has since been shifted to the Western Theater, and that's actually where Stillwell and his comrades in the 61st Illinois were in 1864. Marcy's an old soldier. He'd been in the Army long before the Civil War. He would remain in the Army after the war. So he's used to seeing the conditions actual soldiers have to deal with. This is not a spit and polish sort of situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so I really liked this quote because it's showing that the war is dragging on, but the conditions of the soldiers are being remarked on by the officers in a real manner.
Yeah.
It's not that, oh, you don't have your buttons polished. These are guys who are rough. They've been in the field. They know their job. They know their duty.
More practical.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, touching on this idea that the war continues, 123rd New York Infantry, from the book Soldiering, Sergeant Rice C. Bull, July 4th, 1864.
His name was Rice Bowl?
Rice Bull.
Oh, Bull. I was like, wow, what a horrible name.
Rice C. Bull.
Gotcha.
Excuse me, I drawled the last name.
Yeah.
At daybreak, July 4th, we found them still with us and ready to fight as ever. Early skirmishing commenced and continued all day. Both sides seemed trying to see how much noise they could make. There was more casualties than in home doings on July 4th. At noon, the men of our two divisions had been given a ration of whiskey. This led us to believe the charge was to be made. For some reason, the order, if given, was recalled, but we remained camped close to the picket line. Now, reading that and the other entries that he has around that particular quote, I suspect that that ration of whiskey was because of the holiday. Okay. We really don't. Yes, there are some accounts, and particularly from soldiers remembering, saying that, oh, they gave us a ration of whiskey before the charge and that sort of thing. And maybe he even had dealt with that earlier in the war, but I suspect this was more because of the holiday. Because there was no alcohol ration for the Army at this time. There's still a grog ration for the Navy that has actually, I believe, ended during the Civil War, but there is no alcohol ration for the Army.
So this would have been some kind of private stash that the colonel or someone got a hold of?
Right, or he purchased specifically for the occasion.
Yeah.
They do mention that
it's a treat.
As a treat, exactly. He does mention that it's for the men of our two divisions, though. So this is a good chunk of troops that are getting a whiskey ration of some sort.
A lot of whiskey.
A lot of whiskey. So probably not the private.
Yeah.
Probably not a private stash. Now.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to keep reading quotes. Did you?
So what? How about while they were celebrating, or how did they celebrate it? Like, what would they like? What song wise? Like, did they have songs?
Sure.
With a lot of the songs that we have for 4th of July today, I'm gonna guess come from that era or previous eras.
They do, absolutely,
and post eras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a lot of great songs, of course, that exist today that were not around during the Civil War.
Like we were saying before that Stars and Stripes Forever is like the 4th of July
song.
But that's not a Civil War era song. It's from after the Civil War. Mm-hmm. But go ahead. So you got some of them?
Yeah, I did put together a brief list of patriotic songs from the Civil War era that would have been popular. Of course, we got to start off with probably the most famous Yankee Doodle, which dates to at least 1781 and maybe older than that. The original author is actually unknown, and this is not to be confused with the 1904 song Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Right, that's obnoxious, that one.
Eric was kind enough to remind us before we got started of actually one I didn't have on my list, much to my shame. Hail Columbia.
Hail Columbia, yes.
1789 by Philip File. One of our early unofficial anthems, and it is now used as the entrance song, if you will, for the vice president.
Oh, yes. That's right.
One that we're not as familiar with today, but was very popular with the soldiers during the war, was Minstrel Boy.
No, so that was an interesting one I saw on the list there because to me that's a sad song.
It is, and it's also it's again going back to this whole Irish idea of mourning a song or the lament. It's more along those lines, but it is a patriotic song because it is lamenting the failure of the 1798 revolution. The Minstrel Boy was developed by Thomas More, and
you know what else he wrote? Gary Owen.
Did he really?
According to Tom Berenger.
Got it.
And Wikipedia.
Two good sources.
Well, if Wikipedia says it's true.
Yeah, it's got to be true. Yeah.
Now, this particular song was very popular with soldiers of Irish descent during the Civil War, and even had a third verse written for it during the war that was about the minstrel boy coming back again. So this idea that Ireland will yet prevail. Yeah. The song is also associated with Irish regiments in the United Kingdom, as well as with police and firefighters in both New York City and Boston.
I mean, it's like a very popular... Like it's the song people think about when they think of bagpipes, I think.
Really? Okay. I wasn't certain which song this is.
The Minstrel Boy? It's either that or Scotland the Brave.
That's the one I was...
So I grew up outside of New York. Okay. And so all the police, if they had a bagpipe, but New York especially, if they had a bagpiper or a bagpipe band or something that was part of the police department, in the parades, it was always the Minstrel Boy. And so to me...
Little shout out to our buddy Untold Civil War over there. He's got some connections with the New York Police Department.
That's right. Isn't he a cop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Paul's
it's
a cop.
More of a connection. He is a cop. He has a connection. He's been in jail. No, he's a cop.
He's going to be well versed in that song, then.
Sure. He probably sings it in his sleep. But no, so I always associated that song with bagpipes or Scotland the Brave because of Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Oh, sure.
There
you go.
But they're very similar songs. If you listen to it. In fact, I think it was on the St. Patrick's Day show on YouTube. We were playing the Minstrel Boy on bagpipes. Well, we weren't playing it, but I had it playing.
Sure.
And some wise ass in the comments like, you don't even know that's Scotland Brave. It was like, or that's Scotland music is what he said. And then another guy goes, it's Scotland the Brave. And I was just like,
Incorrect.
It is the Minstrel Boy. but then I went and I played them back to back, and they're very similar.
Okay.
So
it was an honest mistake.
It was an honest
with
mistake.
Bagpipes, everything sounds.
Oh, that's
similar.
true.
That's a good point,
Not
Eric.
Amazing Grace. That sounds different.
Oh,
Well,
well,
it's-
okay, you got me
yeah.
on that.
but
I like how everyone kind of goes,
yeah. Oh yeah. But Rod Stewart's "Do You Think I'm Sexy" does sound the same as those other ones on bagpipes.
That makes sense.
But no, it was an honest mistake. Except the problem was thinking that they were, where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise.
right.
You know
It's-
what I'm saying?
Exactly. It's,
And
they're playing the gotcha.
yeah, and I got them
Right.
because it was Scotland, or it was the Minstrel Boy.
Right.
But we appreciate them listening anyway. Thank you very much. Okay.
Now, of course, the Star Spangled Banner is
Sure.
around by this point, written by Francis Scott Key, as we all know, in 1814. Originally a poem, much longer than the current national anthem. And the national anthem today is only the first stanza of the poem. So
Right.
it's significantly shorter than this very lengthy poem that was written. But the song itself was popular at that time. We're not going to have a national anthem until, I believe, 1931 here in this country, but the Star Spangled Banner is still being played. It's still being sung by federal forces throughout the Civil War. Speaking of national anthems, we already mentioned that one of our unofficial ones was Hail Columbia. Another one was actually America, better known as My Country 'Tis of Thee, by Samuel Francis Smith.
Also known as "God Save the Queen."
Yes, same tune.
Okay.
Yep, much like Star Spangled Banner is a British drinking song. America, My Country 'Tis of Thee is God Save the Queen.
Okay.
Yep. Samuel Francis Smith is going to develop this song, and it was first performed on July 4th, 1831 in Boston.
So it's an American song.
It is.
It's not. So the melody is an American melody.
No. Yeah, God
so
Save
he
the
wrote
Queen
the
already
words.
exists.
So God Save the Queen. All right, gotcha.
Yep.
I was going to say the Queen stole our song, but no, we stole. That makes more sense.
Now, this would be published a year later. It was seen by many, as we already mentioned, a de facto national anthem until the Star Spangled Banner was adopted in, like I said, 1931.
Okay, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these words. The season is finally here. 2021 is going to be a great year, and we know that you're going to come down to Gettysburg. And when you do come down to Gettysburg, you got to take a tour with Getty's Bike Tours. Getty's Bike Tours has been in business since 2005. It is the best way to see the battlefield. Why? Because you don't just see the battlefield, you experience the battlefield. Our tours are led by some of the finest licensed battlefield guides out there, and they make sure that you walk away with a full understanding of what happened here on those 3 days in 1863. Here's the best part. Because you're an Addressing Gettysburg listener, you're going to get 15% off when you make your reservation. Now, this discount only applies to tours. So go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 and book a tour today. There's no better way to see the town you're visiting than to eat your way through it. And there's no better way to eat your way through this town than with Savor Gettysburg food tours. Enjoy a culinary and cultural experience through historic downtown Gettysburg, one delicious bite at a time. Their season runs from April through November with the special Christmas Tastes and Traditions walking food tour during the month of December. So go to SavorGettysburgFoodTours.com and enter promo code AG2021 to receive $5 off your tour. Eat, walk, get a taste of history with Savor Gettysburg. Have you noticed our revamped website at addressinggettysburg.com? Well, that's the fine work of a man named Mike Stretch, and he also redid our logo for us. Both of them I originally designed, and both of them were originally horrible. But now they're nice, and that's all thanks to Mike. Mike has an awesome t-shirt company called Heritage Depot. There you'll find great designs based on Gettysburg and the Civil War with t-shirts and other types of merchandise. So go to heritage-depot.com and spruce up your Getty's Nerd wardrobe. That's heritage-depot.com. Our favorite bookstore in Gettysburg is For the Historian, located at 42 York Street. Isn't it, Eric?
You're darn tootin', Matt.
It's because they have the best selection of Civil War books in Gettysburg, both new and used, and online they have even more books to choose from.
But Matthew, what if the Civil War is simply not my thing?
Not a problem, my fine four-fendered friend. This is For the Historian, after all. They cover history from the ancient world to the 21st century with a strong selection of World War II and
in American Revolution books.
It's astounding how they squeeze thousands of titles from Osprey, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more into their store.
And it's also astounding how you and I both squeeze into our pants every day. Well, handsome, they have a warehouse too, and that's where they keep all those books that are available online at forthehistorian.com. And folks, if you go to forthehistorian.com now and order books until you're blue in the face, be sure you mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund your shipping costs.
What if I prefer to browse in the store and don't want to go online to get my book?
Great question, Doodlebug. Just mention Addressing Gettysburg at checkout, and they'll take 20% off the retail price of your item. So go to forthehistorian.com, stop by 42 York Street, or call 717-685-5207. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207.
Gettysburg, A Nation Divided mobile app is relaunching this summer. Gettysburg, A Nation Divided is an award-winning mixed reality mobile application using augmented reality technology. It transports users into the most crucial moments in the Battle of Gettysburg, the turning point of the Civil War. Users can listen and watch historic figures share their stories as lifelike animated avatars, traverse 360-degree image sequences of the battlefield. Its cinematic battle sequences are narrated by actor Scott Eastwood. The mobile app is available for free on iOS and Android. It's designed to be used anywhere, at home, at school, at the park, or at Gettysburg National Military Park. It uses GPS to help guide you through your journey to see the stories and events unfold at the exact location where they occurred. So go into your phone's app store and get it now for free. That's Gettysburg, A Nation Divided.
Hey, are you planning on spending some time in Gettysburg soon? Well, you got to check out GettysburgBattlefieldTours.com as your source for things to do. Tickets are available for exclusive experiences such as the Sunset Double-Decker Battlefield Tour, Adams County Port Tour Shuttle, and Discoveries Beyond Gettysburg. For details, follow them on Facebook or visit GettysburgBattlefieldTours.com. That's GettysburgBattlefieldTours.com. And we're back.
Now,
the next one here is interesting.
Yes, on the flip side of the coin, we have I Wish I Was in Dixie, or better known as just Dixie, by Daniel Decatur Emmett in 1859, a favorite of Abraham Lincoln's. Emmett, who is from Ohio, of all places, supposedly wrote the song while traveling with his blackface minstrel troupe, which was fairly common at the time, though not necessarily appropriate these days. The song was first performed in New York City. It was essentially the anthem of the Confederacy during the Civil War, though not official. Many, many variants exist, including at least 2 federal versions that mock the Confederacy.
See, now that I'd like to hear.
Oh, I wish I were in the land of traitors, rattlesnakes, and alligators. Run away, run away, run away, Dixieland. That's one of them.
What a voice.
Wow. I never knew that we would get Matt to sing.
I didn't realize I was going to until I started.
And then it was too late.
Then it was too late.
Hello, exactly.
So, yeah, there's a lot of variations on Dixie that still exist today. Some of them are fun. Some of them are mean, to be perfectly honest. But, yeah, it's a very widely used song, and it's true. It was one of Lincoln's favorites. He even mentions it in 64.
It's a good song.
It is.
It's a rousing little number.
Right.
You know? I'll tell you what, when the Star Spangled Banner plays, or the Battle Hymn, or any of these other ones, I don't hear a bunch of people going, yeah! But when Dixie starts playing, everybody starts screaming their heads off.
Oh, certainly.
So, I mean, it is a bit more of a heart-thumping song.
We do have some screaming, of course, at the end of Star Spangled Banner, but it's usually play ball.
Yes, exactly. No, we do cheer it at the end. It's
I mean, Dixie's got that tempo.
It does. It's that
fast,
driving
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly right. Now, what's interesting about probably one of the most popular marching songs of the war, John Brown's Body, is anonymous. We have no idea who originally developed it. At least the sources I looked at were not certain about that. It's written up sometime in early 61, originally called John Brown's Song or Glory Hallelujah. There are many stories as to who and why the lyrics were developed. It does seem that the song was around essentially for the entire war, coming out shortly after April 1861, and was copyrighted in July of that year. There are some accounts that have federal troops that are in Charlestown, what's now West Virginia, developing this song.
Okay. That would make sense to have, that it would be troops there.
Right.
That it would originate there.
Right. And I mean, they were sightseeing. There is lots of accounts of them going to the courthouse where John Brown was tried and then going to the yard where he was hanged, things of that nature.
Yeah. I mean, like my friends and I used to make up songs. Like you're feeling goofy, you go somewhere, something inspires it, somebody comes up with a line and then you start adding to it. To me, that's the way those lyrics always read. Like it's just like a bunch of guys just coming up with stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
And then they teach it to other guys, and then that unit's marching along singing it, and another unit passes them, and they're like, "Hey, what's that tune you're singing?" And then it's like,
just like that.
Yeah, just like that. And then they go, "Oh, well, hold on, let's take a break. Colonel, can we stop so I can teach them the song?" And you know how it goes. You've been there.
I don't think they generally got permission on the march to do that, but yes. Of course, this next song I always found interesting because I've actually sung this in church before.
Yes, so have I.
Which is always
has
always surprised me when I hear it start in church, and then I'm right into it because I love the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
This one always gives me a chill. This song.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, we sang that in our church too, and I can't.
What is it with the Catholics in this
know.
song? Battle hymn. I mean, other churches have hymns, so
Certainly.
it's not like we only have hymns.
Well, Battle Hymn of the Republic was written by Julia Ward Howe, of course, in December.
Because it's about the wrath of God, isn't it? Yeah, well, that's why we like,
That's a good point. Yeah. It is definitely about the wrath of God.
Don't forget, God has wrath.
It's written in December of 1861. It's later published in the Atlantic Monthly in February of 62 and is arguably the most popular song in the Union States during the war. Its tune is to John Brown's Body. So those two songs are integrally linked at the hip.
What's the story of how she wrote those words? Remember the story?
I've heard a couple variations on it. Go for it. Go for it, Matt.
Because that's why I'm asking you. You're the... No, it's something like she hears, I forget what unit it was. Was it the 6th Wisconsin?
It might have been.
It was some unit marching by, and they're singing John Brown's Body.
Right.
I thought it was Massachusetts.
You might be right. 2nd Massachusetts?
It might have been 2nd Mass.
It was a regiment in the United States Forces.
Yeah.
Okay?
Union Army.
The Union Army.
Right.
And
we got it down to that much.
Yes. And they're marching by, they're singing John Brown's Body, and then apparently, like, I don't know, in the middle of the night or something, these lyrics come into her head to that tune because it's stuck in her head. And then so she writes the words to the tune that's stuck in her head. And then how the hell she got it out into the public, I don't know. She must have known a publisher or something, but I don't know how that works.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It would seem so. And that's no surprise. I mean, she's got connections.
Yeah.
So
she's got 3 names. She's important.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes, the 3 names there. Yes. But no, fabulous song. It always amazes me where it pops up, be it in church or things like that.
Yeah, that is a good point. Now that you say that, I do remember as a kid always singing that song, and I don't know. It always kind of perplexed me, but I never questioned it because I like it.
Right.
So I'm like,
exactly.
oh, who cares? It's a fun song to sing.
All the old ladies belt it out.
Oh yeah,
it's
they
always
do that
right at the end of Mass.
It
too,
is
when they're proceeding out of the church.
Yeah,
and they do
during
that throat warble.
Yeah.
With they all. It's like you get to be an old lady, and I guess it's because you can't hold the note, so you got to warble it to hold the note. And so they're like, they're glory, glory, hallelujah. It's so embarrassing. They're all doing it, and none of them are doing it right, and the tempo of their warble is all different. So it's
even with the warble, it's a powerful song.
You're getting choked out by the scent of their funeral
perfume?
home perfume. Yeah.
Funeral home perfume.
That's exactly what it smells like. It reminds me of funeral. It's like a talcum powder lilac thing.
Yeah, I don't know what
Wow.
Funeral home perfume.
Well, here's a bit of
Now, Battle Hymn of the Republic. Battle Hymn of the Republic became so popular that there had to be a Confederate counterpoint to it. And that was God Save the South, written by George Henry Miles in 1861. This is the unofficial anthem of the Confederacy, kind of like Dixie is considered the unofficial anthem as well. Miles himself was a Marylander and published the song under the pen name of Ernest Halfin. Mm-hmm. So, interesting little side note.
And what's the melody of that one? Is that just the same as Battle Hymn of the Republic?
Same. Yep. It's just replacing the words. much more pro-South and we'll win our independence and that sort of thing.
Hallelujah. How about it was a God Save the South? No, that's God Save the Queen. I don't know. Okay, go ahead.
Now, one of my favorites, of course, is The Battle Cry of Freedom by George Frederick Root. That's an 1862 song. Was so popular, much like Battle Hymn of the Republic, Battle Cry of Freedom has a Confederate version as well.
Sure.
Interestingly, it's... You're not surprised by that?
No, not at all.
Yeah. 1864, the presidential campaign, this song is so popular that it's actually going to be used by the Lincoln and soon-to-be Johnson administration as a campaign song. They're going to add another verse to it just about getting Lincoln and Johnson elected.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, very popular song. And then,
it's funny, they don't do that anymore. Like Kennedy, there were some, like Sinatra did songs for Kennedy and stuff. I don't know about anybody after that. I think after that, it was they started using popular music. Like, I remember Reagan used Born in the USA, and Springsteen's like, it's a slam against the USA. Like, it's not, it's like kind of sarcastic.
Right.
Clinton did Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow.
Right.
And then they would always clap on 1 and 3. Don't stop thinking about. And
inevitably, half of the old white guys get out of tune.
Yeah.
Or they get out of beat.
And it's sitting there waving to people. What was Trump had one, didn't he? Oh, I'm proud to be an American.
Wheel in the Sky.
Wheel in the Sky. Yeah.
He had a couple that like the artist didn't want to be involved.
Yeah. I think the only one that finally said yes was the guy who did it Proud to be an American because he needed the money.
Kenny Rogers?
No, Kenny Rogers didn't do that.
I thought he did.
He might have written it, but no, it was. I don't know the guy's name. Let me see. I'm going to look that up. Go ahead. Sing.
No, I'm not going to sing again.
Sing us another song while I'm looking this up.
But the last one on my list for patriotic songs, and again, this was not a completely comprehensive list. I'm sure
Lee Greenwood is the guy. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Who was the president that had wheels on the bus?
Wheels on the bus?
Yeah, they go
round and round?
Round and round, round and round. That was fairly recently, wasn't it?
What?
Never mind. Keep moving.
Wow.
That was Bush, because he just learned that. He goes, well, that's interesting. Wheels on the bus. Round and round.
Moving right along.
Round and round.
And round they go, and I go forward. And round they go the other way, I go backward.
That's pretty good.
In other words, we don't get fooled again.
That was pretty good, Matt.
It's more my imitation of Will Ferrell doing Bush.
Sure.
Yeah.
There we go.
But then, of course, to wrap this part about patriotic songs up, I do have When Johnny Comes Marching Home Again by Patrick Gilmore. 1863 song, originally published under the pen name of Louis Lambert. This song was incredibly popular in both the Union and Confederate armies during the war. It's going to be sung by both sides. You guys have heard of the various battles of the bands that occur during the Civil War.
Yeah.
All of these songs are songs that might have come up during those situations, but of course, the not-so-patriotic songs, the ones that are more pining for home, be it Johnny Comes Marching Home, be it Empty Chair, or things like that.
Faded, what is it called? Faded Dress of Blue? Or
Fade to Black.
Also a good song. But those are the songs that'll be particularly popular in both armies and have the troops of both sides singing along.
And Johnny Comes Marching Home is Johnny We Hardly Knew Ye, but they changed the words to that, right? Melody-wise?
Yes.
Yep. And Johnny We Hardly Knew Ye, if you read or listen to the words of that, it's horrendous.
Yeah.
It's like, you having an arm, you having a leg, Haru. It's like, stop Haruing me. I got no arm and a leg. Stop standing there saying Haru and come and help me.
I got no arm and leg. I need some help.
Come on.
Now, this song, When Johnny Comes Marching Home Again, will be adapted by other countries and their forces as well, to include British troops in World War I who changed it to When Tommies Come Marching Home Again, which is a pretty easy change and pretty appropriate, too. So
it is a good. That's another rousing one if it's done right.
Right.
If it's done right, it's got a good beat. That weird kind of minor melody is pretty nice. It's good. It's good stuff. Good stuff. And I like these songs. And a lot of these songs, obviously are still not with necessarily the name. A lot of these melodies, let's put it that way. A lot of these melodies are still very big today around the 4th of July. But you know which one they weren't singing during the Civil War? Which I think is one that they should have been singing.
What's that?
Ray Charles's America.
If Charles had been around, sure.
If he had been around, I think if the song had been written, I think isn't that a later song?
I believe so.
America the Beautiful, right? Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain.
I don't think it's older, actually.
Older?
Yeah.
Older than the Civil War?
I think so.
Look that up, Eric.
Here we go.
Here he's looking it up. And what's he going to find? I love that one. That one always gives me chills. In fact, last year during the fireworks at Pickett's Charge, or at the Angle, I had my friend Steve, I had him cue it up, and I said, when I tell you, play it. And I was doing a live video on Instagram, and he queued it up, or he played it when I told him to cue it up, and it ended right with the grand finale. Perfect timing, like as if it was planned. And everybody in the thing was like, how the hell did you do that? And I said, I felt it. And it's true. I felt it. I sensed that it was coming, and I was like, I think this is about as long as we've got left until Ray Charles would be done. And I said, hit it, Steve. And he did. It was great. I'm still very proud. It's my crowning achievement. Go ahead, Eric. What do you got?
Okay, so the music was written in 1882, correction, 83. The lyrics in 1895, but it wasn't published until 1910.
So looks okay. So it is not older than the Civil War. It looks like Maddie gets
Dan Butterfield.
the Dan Butterfield of the day. Finally got my own Dan Butterfield. I have not yet had a Dan Butterfield.
Oh, you just gave yourself a Dan Butterfield?
Yeah. Well, Dan Butterfield's get everybody.
I thought you were giving it to Matt.
No, this Matt. I'm Maddie. He's Matt.
We really need to stop recording with people named Matt.
It's true.
It's really
You're our second Matt this week.
You had Atkinson in?
Matt Groening from The Simpsons.
So,
yes.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. We're getting up there. No, our friend Matt Sheeds, his grandfather was Colonel Jacob Sheeds. He's a
cool.
guide of renown.
Yeah.
And so we talked about him. It was a very fun episode to do.
I'm getting to a place where like everybody I know is named Matt. And it's kind of disconcerting.
Well, everybody I know is named Eric. There's a lot of Matts and Erics in this area, and people need to start like coming up with some new names.
Other Erics.
Oh, I know.
Just the one.
Again, guys, we're all in a similar age bracket, and it was all that late 70s, early 80s. There was a lot of Erics and a lot of Matts. I had a lot of Erics and Matts in my class.
And we're all Catholics, so we're named after apostles.
Right.
Eric the apostle, Matthew the tax collector.
Jason.
Thanks.
Jason.
You know, the funny thing is, like, I'm named Matthew, and he was a tax collector, and I'm terrible at math.
Oh, yeah, so am I.
Good choice, Mom and Dad. All right, so what else have we got here? We got the songs. What about on the home front? Are they doing it on the home front?
They are doing it on the home front. I want to dive into the newspapers a little bit for that.
Dive into that.
Okay. Let me do two more quotes. One from 64 that I think is very powerful, and then I'll wrap it up with a 65 quote as well.
Go, baby, go.
Okay. Today being Independence Day, several educated comrades made short speeches to small crowds of willing listeners. Our desperate condition was fully discussed as there was no prospect of being exchanged and seeing our far-off homes again. We were advised to keep orderly and abide our time when Sherman's army might reach us, as it was known that he was marching with 100,000 men through Georgia. The fearful monthly death roll was commented on, and the prayer meetings would be held if any would attend. 3 rousing cheers from 200 or more prisoners were given for the old flag, while hundreds of others sang "Rally Round the Flag, Boys" and the Star-Spangled Banner. One of the sailors that was good at sewing made a small American flag from some red flannel and part of a white shirt. This was waved as the crowd sang, and the cheers went up all over the northern part of the stockade. All was quiet and orderly again in a few minutes. Private Robert Knox Sneeden, 40th New York Infantry, from the book Eye of the Storm, and he is in Andersonville.
I knew I'd heard that before, but I couldn't remember where.
It's a powerful book. He's a great writer and a fantastic illustrator as well. He does a lot of drawings, but his entries from Andersonville are very, very powerful, and it really moved me when I was researching about how the soldiers in the worst of situations, except for perhaps combat itself, are still trying to celebrate and commemorate Independence Day, even in that situation.
Well, so we were talking Christmas.
Right.
They're trying to have some semblance of home and, something familiar to them and everything. And what was it? Speaking of books, Matt, you've got a new one that just came out not too long ago.
I do. I've the Faces of Union Soldiers series is plugging right along with our second book. That's the Faces of Union Soldiers at South Mountain and Harper's Ferry. So,
now, explain to people, in case they're unfamiliar with it, what is the Faces of Union Soldiers? What's the idea behind that?
Sure. The Faces of Union Soldiers series is utilizing the CDV or Carte Vista collection that has been collected by my co-author, Joe Stahl, and I've begun my own collection as well, but we're still primarily exclusively using Joe's images. And he's been collecting CDVs for years. He has hundreds of them, and he was originally collecting for the Maryland campaign. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the fighting at South Mountain, Harper's Ferry, Antietam, Shepherdstown. And so we wanted to utilize this collection, and we started developing a book that became Faces of Union Soldiers at Antietam, my first book, which came out in 2019, that discusses 36 soldiers on the Antietam battlefield, where they were, what their units were doing, and who they were. And then diving into the image themselves, like what are we seeing? What's his uniform telling us? That sort of thing. And we've done it again, this time looking at the opening battles of the Maryland campaign at South Mountain and Harper's Ferry. And I know you guys have spoken to one of the licensed battlefield guides here at Gettysburg about the Harper's Ferry Cowards.
Yeah.
Those regiments feature in this book as well.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. All right, so everybody get a hold of that. I'll put it on the website. I think it is on the website already.
I appreciate
that.
But
go to our website, to the books page, recommended reading page. Okay, so I'm sorry I interrupted you there, but I thought, maybe I'll interrupt you for a plug of your book.
No, I appreciate the plug and the ability to do the plug.
And I didn't want to forget. That was what I was afraid of. I was like, oh, he's got a book out. And I knew I'd forget. I could just write it down, but I'd forget to look at it.
It was more natural this way.
Yeah, exactly.
And to finish it off, we're going to go back to Elijah Hunt Rhodes in 1865, now a brevet colonel of the 2nd Rhode Island Infantry. He wrote Another Independence Day in the Army, and this has been my 5th. Today we are back at Washington with our work finished. We have had a fine time today with a large party of ladies and gentlemen from Washington who, with the officers of the 2nd Rhode Island, dined at my headquarters. We managed a fine spread, and Sergeant Major Benoni Sweet amused the party by tightrope walking exhibition. The day has been fun. So little bit of...
It's a little bit of a happier 4th of July for him.
A little bit of frivolity, a little bit of fun. And, of course, he's aware that he's going to be going home soon.
Right. It's almost over.
Almost over,
You made it, Lige.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're doing things on the home front. Now, how about after the war, Matt? After the war... Are they celebrating all over is it like the country's back together again? Okay, guys, we can do 4th of July again? Or is it like, we're not going to do that for a while? How does that work?
It's like, we're not going to do that for a while.
Everywhere?
At least in the southern states.
Well, that's what I mean.
In the northern states, they're still celebrating. Of course, we have the famous comment that we joked about before this show about Vicksburg not celebrating for 80 years. That's not entirely true. I actually did find some references to it celebrating lightly in 1877.
Would that have been more like privately, like certain families would do it?
It's not the city itself.
Right. Was there a ban on it, or was just nobody in the mood?
Nobody in the mood. It very much kind of portrayed your colors too, if you will.
Right.
And what side you might be leaning towards or had leaned toward.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
Right. But I'm glad that you brought up post-war, because I do have one newspaper article that I think you'll find particularly interesting regarding that. I looked at a lot of newspapers for this conversation, and this actually comes from the Charleston Daily Courier on June 30th, 1865. So this is preparatory to the 4th of July there in Charleston. It says, Independence Day. As will be seen by the annexed order issued by General Gilmore, district and post commanders throughout the department are instructed to take measure for the celebrating in a befitting manner the approaching 4th of July. We have already made mention of the fact that the people of Savannah have made liberal arrangements for the celebrations of the day in that city, and we learn that Hilton Head and other points in the department, 4th of July will be appropriately observed. In Charleston, we are going to have a great time. In the morning, each citizen will rise at the usual hour and partake of breakfast. In the afternoon, the programs will be varied. All the people will indulge in sleep. After this glorious effect, and when the shades of darkness descend over the city, every man, woman, and child will have the delightful privilege of studying the beauty and philosophy of the planetary system. Pyrotechnics will be omitted. We have had enough of that already.
Oh.
I'm sure they have.
Yes. I loved that quote.
Yeah, that was a good quote.
Yeah. And what's fantastic is they follow it up with a copy of General Gilmore's order to the district saying, hey, we're going to celebrate 4th of July. Yes, you're still an occupied territory at this time, but we're going to do what we can, and we want to see that happen if at all possible.
So he's like forcing them to do it? Or he's just saying, we're going to do this.
Right. It says Independence Day, Tuesday the 4th of July, Proximo being Independence Day, district and post commanders throughout the department will take the necessary steps and issue the necessary orders for celebrating in a befitting manner with the appropriate ceremonies that great national holiday. On that day, all manner of labor not absolutely necessary for the preservation of public property, the care of the sick, and the execution of existing sanitary and police regulations will be suspended. A national salute will be fired at sunrise and a salute 100 guns at noon, immediately after which the troops will be paraded and the Declaration of Independence and the President's Emancipation Proclamation will be read to them. Wherever it is deemed practicable, an oration will be delivered. Local commanders are authorized to make necessary modifications in the above program as existing circumstances require. The inhabitants of the country and citizens temporarily residing within the department are cordially invited to participate in these national festivities. So they're not ordering anybody, hey, you better go.
Yeah, we're doing this, and they're inviting people.
Right. The military is doing this. Come on out and join us.
Sabotage the army.
Right.
Use it as an opportunity to sabotage the army.
Right, exactly.
I wonder if anybody did.
I doubt really sabotage at that point.
Poison somebody.
Yeah, I highly doubt that.
Well,
but
they missed an opportunity there.
Potentially, but I really the bitterness that we get in that editor's comments prior to this order being posted is really interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating to read all this stuff and just. It's nothing new under the sun. Nothing's changed. Every people are the same. We think that it's all new and we're the originators of.
It just comes back
around, and nobody's really special.
Yeah. Well, speaking,
even with the barbecues, I thought that was a 20th century thing, but no. No.
Speaking of issues in the paper and things like that, this comes from a very divided part of the country, Baltimore. This is the Daily Exchange, so not one of the better-known Baltimore papers, but I think you're going to get an idea of who they're leaning towards pretty quickly. This is their article kind of talking about what happened during the 4th. So July 6th of 61. Yesterday was the quietest and indeed the most gloomy day that ever has been known here. Notwithstanding the effort made on Saturday last on the part of certain of our, quote, loyal citizens to have a general display of the United States flag from private dwellings as well as from public buildings for the purpose, evidently, of stymieing or stigmatizing, the disloyal. Those who did not choose... Stigmatizing, yes.
Okay.
As disloyal, those who did not choose to conform to their suggestion. The appeal met with... Excuse me, I got to pull it to my eyes here. The appeal met with scarcely any response. Several public places which have herewith never failed to pay the customary tribute that day were flagless. Very few flags were erect in the public buildings. One of the prominent parties of the flag scheme who had hoisted a large flag on top of his house on the afternoon of July 3rd, finding his banner on the 4th instant solitary and alone, hauled it in early on that day. The morning of Independence Day was ushered by salvos of artillery from the batteries from 2 or 3 points within the city and from Fort McHenry, the prison of several American citizens. But there was an entire absence of any celebration or demonstration by the more sober-minded of its citizens. The 85th anniversary of the American independence was celebrated at Druid Hill Park by a small number of persons favorable to the present Civil War. The exercises consisted of prayer, the chanting of the Declaration of Independence. I found that description interesting.
Chanting of the Declaration, the whole thing?
Apparently, and an oration by Mr. R. Stockett Matthews. There were 2 bands' music present, which discoursed several national airs during the day.
Sheesh.
So, a little bit of venom there from our good friends over in Baltimore.
Yeah, but geez, the chanting of the Declaration of Independence.
I have a feeling that's a shot more than a reality. That they're saying the Declaration was read and it just sounded like chanting as opposed to actually reading it in a real manner.
You think? Okay.
That's just my theory.
Or maybe it was, who knows? Who knows? Who knows anything anymore? When did American flag bikinis become a part of the July 4th tradition?
You know, as lovely as that may be, I think it's important that we mention that the American flag bikini or shorts or whatever, that's all against the flag code.
Oh, so you're not being a good American or patriot by wearing an American flag bikini, though we may love that. You are not actually doing good. You're not getting brownie points with Uncle Sam,
right,
and Betsy Ross and all Betsy the other fictitious characters.
The flag code of the United States actually specifically says it is not to be worn as a clothing item. So our use of it as beach towels, as shorts, T-shirts, that sort of, none of that
sacrilegious.
It is technically sacrilegious.
Yeah, but I mean, these aren't laws; these are codes.
It's a code, exactly.
Yeah. So really, the codes are for anybody who cares. Basically, and so the people that use it as a beach towel or a bikini or like the tiger guy, what was his name? Joe.
Oh, yeah.
Which, not Joe Dirt. What the hell is his name? Eric, what's the name of the tiger guy? Joe.
Oh my God, Joe Exotic.
Joe Exotic, thank you.
Yes.
Him wearing an American flag like leather jacket or whatever the hell he had. That is not showing patriotism as much as you may think it is. You're actually insulting the flag.
That is what it implies in the flag codes. Absolutely. It's an insult to the flag.
I expect that none of our listeners will be wearing American flag bikinis or jackets or pants or anything like that this year. Thank you.
Now, in a more celebratory context, because you were asking about that, as we're moving away from the front, away from the real areas of tension.
But Confederate flag bikinis are okay, because if you want to disrespect that, that's different. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That is definitely different.
I'm sorry. It just occurred to me.
This comes from the Summit County Beacon in Akron, Ohio. 4th of July celebration, orders of the day, the national salute of 24 guns at sunrise. The procession will be from 10:30 a.m. on Market Street in front of the Empire House under the direction of such and such city marshal of the day. The following order will be the band, the committee of arrangements, the president of the day, the chaplain, the orators and readers, the mayor and common council, military of the county under command of Brigadier General G.W. McNeil, the firemen, delegations of each township in alphabetical order under the respective marshals. The procession will then move up Market Street to Broadway, up Broadway to Exchange Street, up Exchange Street to the fairgrounds, and around the fairgrounds to the speaker's stand. So pretty extensive parade.
Yeah, and you know that they had to do it in alphabetical order because they argued over who gets to go first.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, you know what? Fine. ABC order.
Deal with it.
Deal with it, babies. Well, that's not fair because Albemarle gets to go first all the time.
Next year we'll go Z first.
Yeah, we'll do it backwards. Reverse alphabetical order.
Right.
All right.
Now,
all right, so go ahead.
They do have an order of exercises listed in this little announcement as well. Music, prayer of the chaplain, song America. We already talked about that one.
Ray Charles. That one, or God Save the Queen America.
God Save the Queen America. Yep. Reading of the Declaration of Independence. Music again. Oration. Music. Reading of Washington's farewell address. A song by a gentleman whose name I can't make out, German oration, music, and then refreshments.
It should be said that you're reading from, like a photocopy of a newspaper?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's not that you're illiterate. It's just that it's hard to read some of them there.
I appreciate that caveat.
Yeah, I don't want people thinking, man, this kid's dumb. Like, it's not him, it's the paper.
Let's see. All bands, military, and fire companies of the county are invited to attend with their delegations per order of the Council of Arrangements. So they're prepping for a very intricate 4th of July. And we see this, like I said, the further we get north and into away from the front and away from the border states, we see that more and more. A lot more celebration and stuff.
All right. Eric had to leave. His basement is flooding. He just got a notification.
Well, it has been raining cats and dogs around here.
It has. Is anybody in your way, Eric? Huh? Are we in your way? Anybody? No. Can you get out? Okay. Good luck.
Godspeed.
Yes, Godspeed.
Ew.
Flooded basements are gross.
They are.
Okay.
Having had one that flooded a lot growing up.
Yeah. All right, so where are we now here? So
I just got done with 61. I thought it might be interesting to look at some of the Western states as well.
Okay, get some Western states, and then we have to start wrapping it up. So give me some Western states,
so let's
and then
look at. I'll just do I'll tone it down a little bit.
Okay.
This one's coming out of the Washington Standard, out of Olympia, Washington. It says, on this glorious anniversary of our nation's birthday, at your bidding, I enter upon the task of giving expression to the sentiments, which actuate the celebration. From here, let the message go forth that the territory, wearing the name of the immortal father of his country, celebrated with renewed zeal the anniversary of Independence Day. Far remote from the scenes of blood and carnage, of the trial and danger now being undergone by the gallant soldiers in the service of the United States, these devoted men now so gloriously maintaining our nationality, saving to ourselves and posterity our beloved country and its free institutions, have our heaviest prayers for their safety and stresses. So we've got celebrating, apparently a fairly zealous celebration out there in the Washington territory. This one I wanted to hit too because it's actually looking at the 4th of July from occupied territory in 62.
Okay.
This is from Memphis, Tennessee. Now, it starts off with fully 2 months since the federal fleet entered Memphis. As you're probably aware, Matt, the United States Navy beat the dog crap out of the Confederate Navy in front of Memphis in the spring of 62. Yesterday opened gloriously, as all days do in Memphis, with a prospect of being as hot as those preceding it, and the batteries opened with 100 guns at sunrise, startling Southern rebels who had blotted the 4th of July from their list of anniversary days. The supposition that the mortar fleet had opened upon the city, or that Jeff Thompson had done for once as he had promised, and commenced the opening the back door of Memphis with artillery, preparatory to letting in his horde of marauders to burn and destroy a place that he could not hope to hold. Loyal people who had kept in remembrance last year when it was when it was rank treason to speak of Independence Day were not frightened. The first 4th of July celebration in Memphis since the inauguration of the war had been duly and properly commenced. A seaman shouting, "Hurrah for the 4th of July, Sunday comes every week, but Independence Day only once a year." So we've got some celebrating going on there in Memphis, occupied Memphis.
Sure, yeah. So is it probably the same situation as, I forget where that was, where it's like, hey, we're doing this, come join us, or...
That was Charleston, yeah.
Charleston, yeah, okay. Is it the same type of situation?
It was, where basically the military authorities say, the military is doing this, if you want to partake, by all means, do so. And as that implied,
those damn Yankees.
Well, the Southern leading individuals still in Memphis were making themselves essentially scarce.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right. Let's move into 1863. Keep the ball rolling.
All right,
here.
roll it.
So we've got, coming out of the Chicago Tribune, how it was celebrated: excursions, picnics, accidents, incidents, and amusements. The patriotic pleasure seekers found little with which to amuse himself in Chicago on the anniversary of our national independence. There was no public display, no general celebrations, and no exercises of any kind by a municipal character. Yet everybody quietly celebrated in their own account. So the city itself is not pulling out all the stops for Independence Day. The war's on. 63, of course, is gloomy, at least initially, for the Union. And so there's a lot of private celebrations. As early as midnight Friday, the burning of India crackers, firecrackers, and other explosives began. In the early part of the evening, in the alleys and in the streets, young America, not having the fear of the mayor's proclamation before his eyes, did attempt prematurely to exhibit his patriotic inclinations. But vigilant police stationed in the most unexpected places pounced upon the youth and speedily extinguished his enthusiasm. After 12 o'clock, all restrictions were removed, and from then until daylight, the night was made hideous with the exploding crackers, candles, torpedoes, and the like. It seemed as if bedlam were turned loose. Whoa. So a lot of firecrackers and whatnot going off.
Well, it sounds like they were having a good time.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what they're saying. At sunrise, by order of the Board of Police Commissioners, a national salute of 35 guns was fired from the avenue by the old Chicago Light Artillery. So again, this idea of the national salutes being fired. Excursions, everybody who could went out of town and exchanged the dust and tumult of the city life for a day in the country with the accomplishments of pure air, or the accompaniments, of pure air, clean water, and a ramble in the brave old forest. There was less intoxication in the city than on any other occasion within our...
On the 4th of July?
On the 4th of July in our recent memory.
That's boring.
This is remarkable considering that every saloon in the city was at full blast and that everybody had an abundance of money.
Oh, so it's not that there was no intoxication. It was that there was less intoxication.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Accidents, we rejoice that there were... that we are able to record few accidents and none of them fatal.
Well, that's always good.
With so many kids burning firecrackers, they actually do describe one child getting fairly badly burned because he was shooting blanks with his gun and a firecracker got tossed into his powder horn, which then burst.
Ow.
Yeah. No fatalities. Fireworks. There was no public exhibition of fireworks.
Can you imagine? I guarantee you it was like one of his buddies that thought it would be a funny prank to throw.
Oh, yeah.
And, kill him.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus.
I certainly would have wrung somebody's neck for that.
Hell yeah.
But again, we don't have any public fireworks displays going on, and the amusements are all done by the individuals themselves. So,
See, I wonder if this is why, like, a lot of states or cities have, like, no fireworks laws because of that. When it was, like, the Wild West, people were throwing fireworks in kids' powder horns.
right.
You know,
Exactly.
but they do it anyway, so what's the difference? All right, so go ahead, Matt. We got to wrap it up soon here. So
Okay.
give me 64.
Okay, 1864. This comes from the Daily Ohio Statesman out of Columbus, Ohio. Celebration of the 4th. The anniversary of the nation's birth was observed in this city by a pretty general suspension of business and the adjournment of its population to the parks and neighboring groves. So, like you were talking about in the opening, where we go and travel for the 4th, they were traveling for the 4th.
Okay.
There were no public demonstrations of any kind. The picnics at Stewart's Grove and Goodale Park were attended by vast multitudes of both sexes. Except to a fight or two between different parties of rowdies in the former place, there were no disturbances worth mentioning during the day. The juveniles in town devoted themselves patriotically and enthusiastically to the explosion of fireworks, and in this respect the city was not unlike a Chinese town in the state of siege. Taken all in all, Independence Day in Columbus was very quiet, orderly, and a pleasant holiday.
All right, and now 65.
65, I wanted to specifically look at the Standard out of London, England.
Oh.
Their American correspondent is talking about the celebration of Independence Day in New York.
Okay.
I got to bring this one to
interesting.
my eyes here.
Good one. That's very tiny.
Yes, it is. The sensation of the week, of course, is the, quote, celebration of our national anniversary. Your correspondent were in danger of forgetting that he would but look from the window to be forcibly reminded that Independence Day, that Independence Day had, with its hideous cacophony, come.
Cacophony.
Cacophony.
Okay, go ahead.
A tumultuous crowd.
Yes, sir.
A tumultuous crowd gurgling through all of the streets. Street fair, atrocious odors, and smoke rising from every thoroughfare.
It's very small writing,
It
ladies and
is, and I
gentlemen.
lost my place. I
Yeah.
apologize. So basically, he's saying the streets stink. There's thousands of people. They're making all sorts of atrocious noise, and he's not enjoying it. He goes on to
Typical Brit.
well, he goes on to talk about the music, or as he put it, the quote brass bands, the tooting of fish horns, the capers of the multitude. These speak but too plainly of the personage of the quote over glorious 4th. The people of the northern states generally determined to indulge in a double holiday upon the occasion to commemorate at once the birth of the nation and the return of peace. And it must be confessed that that if their indescribable extravagance, any proof of their sincerity, they are certainly honest in this pursuit. They have conquered, and no one will question their right to rejoice. But before the very capture of, but from the very nature of things, the 4th of July has become a sectional holiday and will never be again a national holiday.
Ah, okay.
11 states of the glorious Union have no interest in Independence Day. So
Eric doesn't buy it.
He's going to go on to basically describe how the war has rendered the country apart, how it's no longer a national holiday, how the widows and orphans of the South have no salve of victory to soothe their loss,
right,
and the destruction done to their way of life.
I'm sure, that's right for at least a generation, maybe two, but eventually they'll get over it, and they do. And here we are, once again, united and in love with each other. So madly in love with each other. We don't care if we have political differences. We love each other so much. We don't say a crossword about the other because we're just so much in love as a nation united under the flag of freedom.
You are laying it on thick.
I am laying it on very thick because I'm bringing it to a close. So that's it. All right, so that's all you got there, Maddie?
That is what I have for
all
you
right,
this time.
very
It's
good.
been a pleasure, Matt, to
it's always
be back
a pleasure
on Addressing Gettysburg. Thank you and Eric for having me.
Absolutely. You're always welcome here. I hope you know that. And we always enjoy having you on as well. You know, even though, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a Civil War song, we're going to end with our favorite.
Absolutely.
Our favorite patriotic air, Stars and Stripes Forever. And so when, well, that's it. I mean, what's the next holiday that we've got coming up here?
Well,
I don't know if we have any more holidays. Well, I guess it would be Halloween.
Right.
Right?
That would be the next one I
That would
really
be
think
the
of.
next one, yeah. All right, well then, so Halloween will, because Labor Day, we don't care. That wasn't a
Labor
thing.
Day is, of course,
Yeah.
important. We love Labor Day and the
Do we?
long weekend.
Oh, because we get a long weekend, yeah, but it doesn't really mean anything. Okay, so Labor Day is not going to be celebrated, but 4th of July, Halloween is, and then we'll come full circle back to our very first one last year, which was Thanksgiving.
Right.
And I don't know. We've got to figure out how we're going to do this. If we're going to do the same thing every year, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have a happy 4th of July. Keep your hands and don't wear those American flag bikinis. We'll see you next time. Need a Corps badge or other insignia for your uniform? Then check out the Badge Maker. Here's what some of his satisfied customers had to say. Miranda said, I ordered an identification disc from Joe and it's fantastic. He hand-stamped it exactly as I wanted. Greg said, my unit has purchased from him in the past quality badges and good service. And Jerry S. says, the Badge Maker is the go-to place for accurate replica Civil War badges. So go to CivilWarCorpsBadges.com and attach a message with your order saying you heard about him on Addressing Gettysburg.
I brought a tomato sandwich.
Shut up! You stupid son of a bitch!